Welcome back. Welcome back. You are listening to Lurie Daniel Favors on SiriusXM's Urban View, where talk empowers and becomes action. How are the trees? That's a question we should be asking a whole lot more in our community, but maybe we'd ask more of that question if we had more trees to think about. Joining me right now is Alexa Imani Spencer. So glad to have her back. She's a journalist with experience covering health, business, finance, and education. Her work has appeared in USA Today, The Commercial Appeal, Black Enterprise, The Washington Informer, and other publications. She currently covers health disparities and solutions in the Black community for Word in Black, which I've already acknowledged is one of my favorite outlets right now. Alexa Imani Spencer, it's a real pleasure to have you here. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning, everybody.
Absolutely. You had a really fascinating article, and fascinating because, I have been accused of being a granola girl. As for the Black folks, that means I'm a tree hugger. I believe in nature. I believe in connecting with nature. So, I take that with pride. But your article, which was entitled Why We Need More Trees in Black Neighborhoods, really laid bare, I think, for all of us, the challenges that arise when it comes to environmental inequities. And one of those key inequities is reflected in the rate of trees that exist in our communities as compared to the rate of trees that exist, or the number of trees and the percentage of trees that exist in other communities. Can you give us a little bit of insight as to what tree cover in a community provides? Why is it important to have tree cover? And then I want to get into what the nature of the disparity looks like.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for having me. I'm super excited to have this conversation with you today. And you are not alone. I am a fellow granola crunchy Black woman, and I'm proud of it, which
That's right.
we can unpack Black folks' relationship with nature another time, but we have some stigma, that we have to get rid of when it comes to our relationship with nature. But for this particular article, again, I was taking a look at tree inequity. So what exactly is tree inequity? This is something that the Black community is faced with when certain parts of a city or community have less tree coverage than other parts. We have to talk about why. And so Black income, Black low income, and other people of color are less likely to have tree coverage or shade in their communities versus, it could literally be the other side of the city. Wealthier, whiter neighborhoods are more likely to have coverage. And this is a problem because when we don't have tree coverage, we're also missing out on the benefits of trees.
What are some of those benefits for those of our community who perhaps born and raised, 3 generations in the hood, in the urban centers, maybe big mama or grandmama, your folks down south have an appreciation for trees, but in our everyday environment, Brooklyn kids, we may not even recognize the importance of them because it's been so long since we've been connected to them. What role do trees play in preserving overall community health?
Absolutely. It's almost as if trees are like natural medicine because they have both biological and mental benefits. So when we talk about the mental benefits, having trees within your community lessen anxiety and depression. We know that anxiety and depression are 2 major issues that, our community struggle with just because of our everyday lives and how we're situated in society. So literally having trees outside of your door can make a difference. This is why you have Black folks who are taking up a mission of doing more forest bathing. Some folks will go hiking or walking in forest just to get those health benefits. And so then when we talk about, the more bodily benefits, lowering blood pressure. So scientists have found that literally just by looking at a photograph of a tree, your blood pressure goes down. It's amazing.
Whoa.
Yeah. They have some powerful benefits. And, other things like lengthening your lifespan. You're less likely to have asthma, if you're living in an environment that have trees because they literally clean our air.
So lower blood pressure, decreased anxiety, decreased depression. And what's interesting is that we talk about these issues a lot in our community when it comes to health, right? The high anxiety, depression, mental health insecurities, high blood pressure. These are all things that are really prevalent within our community. And it's shocking to me, as much as I am a granola woman, it's shocking to me that having access to trees produces such a biophysical impact that it really can lessen some of the issues that we're experiencing collectively when it comes to our overall physical health. This idea that looking at a tree I got to be honest with you. One of the things we do every morning in our moment of gratitude, and I'm like, I hope you have a personal ritual where you either chanting, praying, going into your meditation closet, go outside and talk to a tree, do something to help you get centered so that your internal environment is also being cared for the same way we have to eat and we have to sleep. But the fact that a connection to nature, which is as tenuous as looking at a picture, can have an impact, a calming effect, that to me says a lot. And when I'm thinking about some of my wealthier, whiter friends and some of the environments in their schools where they have, there's one school that's just sort of built around a park that some of my friends send their kids to, and there's so much nature infused in it. And you mentioned this stigma. There's a lot of snickering about some of these environments from our community. They go with them trees in that classroom. Them babies need some reading, writing, and arithmetic. But if I'm hearing you correctly, that's actually the right approach. Incorporating more nature into the classroom, be it trees on the block or plants in the house, there are some real benefits there that our kids could be getting access to, that our community could be getting access to, that for some reason, Alexa Imani Spencer, we're just not. How does this happen where some communities have all the tree cover and all the shade and others do not have any tree cover or any shade?
Yeah, I mean, one of the main reasons is redlining. When we talk about why our community lacks access to many resources, we have to take a look at the history, because nothing is done by accident. Our
Right.
community landscape, there's a design effort when it comes to getting those things together. So when we talk about redlining, historic racist policies, that place Black people in particular parts of a city and kept them out of other parts of a city, that also had to do with what resources then surrounded where we live. And so, Black neighborhoods, there's not an effort all the time when it comes to local government to plant trees in our communities.
Wow. I'm thinking one of the things I kind of will joke around a lot because when we live in Brooklyn, because I love my block. I love my Brooklyn block. It's amazing. We did have to move to the suburbs, however, because it was too hot. And one of the things I used to joke about, and I don't mean just hot in terms of temperature, I mean hot in terms of energy, right? Like if there's gonna be a shooting in Bed-Stuy, chances are our block was gonna be one of the spots where you would think it's probably that block. And one of the things that I realized is that I would jokingly say, the sounds of summer are birds chirping, helicopters flying, and gunshots, right? Because when you talk about the summertime, the block gets hot. I've noticed, and this is just purely anecdotal, Alexa, so I can't tie anything scientific to this, but it has seemed to me that the more we have infused caring for the block in our block culture, the less stress the block has held. When we first brought trees and we had to advocate for a bunch of trees to be planted on the block, they were planted, and we had to really change our entire culture around caring for these trees because typically, people would just let their dogs poop and pee in them, is what I was telling the audience earlier. They would, no one cared for them. And once we incorporated the kids to help us care for the blocks, then the kids would do the police and be like, you can't let your dog pee here, mister. That's our tree. Like, you know what I mean? Like there was a different sense of community investment that came from really being centered around making sure the block was beautiful, but that beauty was all really tied up into the nature that we were bringing into the block. In the course of your reporting, has any of that been explored in any meaningful? Is there a study I can look to that can point me to perhaps even incorporating more nature being a violence reductor? Am I dreaming here, or is that even a possibility?
You're definitely not dreaming. You're making me wonder if you look through some of my reporting before this conversation, because
Well,
no,
I do my research now, sis, but I didn't quite see that, so that's why I have to ask.
I love it. We're just on the same page here, and it's great that you brought that up because, yes, in previous reporting, I actually wrote about an effort that's happening in Philadelphia where local professors and researchers, at universities are beautifying and restoring Black neighborhoods in Philadelphia and looking at
Mm,
the health effects of it. And so, literally, getting rid of abandoned homes, not tearing them down, but restoring the face of them. It makes a difference to put fresh windows and doors and take down the boards, get rid of some of the graffiti off of the buildings and clean up the front yards. People are
mm.
tending to come out of their homes more. They're tending to feel
Wow.
safer, and not only feel safer but be safer. There's a direct connect between restoring these homes and lowering gun violence. The two are directly connected. So yes, it does get rid of.
Wow. Okay, so if y'all block is hot like Lurie's block, then let's see if we can get a tree planting project. Let's see if we can beautify some things, because people, when you're tied to it, and that's one of the things that looking at the kids really showed me, getting the kids involved and having them care made the adults care. Because there's nothing like getting shaded by a bunch of kids. Like if the kids be like, "Ooh, your dog always be peeing. Ooh, you can't," like there's nothing quite like the shade that a 9-year-old group of Black children can provide you. So it has shifted some things. One of the things that you cover in this article was how natural disasters can have a really outsized impact on the destruction of nature as we experience it. And you mentioned what happened with Hurricane Katrina, and I was really surprised to see that, or to learn that there were over 200,000 trees that were destroyed as a result of that hurricane. Talk with us about the impact that that had and what the state of recovery from that trauma looks like today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hurricane Katrina did a massive destruction in New Orleans. And I think we're all familiar with this. 2005, the hurricane swept through the Gulf and totally tore down the city. And I think one thing that's important to mention here is that it had a major impact on the lower Ninth Ward. So, the lower
Mm,
Ninth Ward, if folks are not familiar, is a predominantly Black community in New Orleans, and it's historically Black. And so when this hurricane swept through, it tore down homes and, really just knocked out generations of wealth for that Black community. But it also took out trees. As you mentioned, Lurie, it took out 200,000 trees. And so
mm,
this particular neighborhood was affected. And I spoke with a resident there. I call her Miss Cynthia. She is a 78-year-old resident of New Orleans, a native. And she talked to me about coming back to her community, and there were no more palm trees, that she loved.
mm.
And even on her own property, her family's property, there was one tree that did stand the test of the storm. This is a pecan tree, and she mentioned that it's not producing, how it used to, but it did. It stood the test of time. And so just hearing
Wow.
her speak about that was pretty powerful, because you've lost everything. In her words, she lost everything, and that's all that was left. That was the only original.
Mm,
And so there are local and national organizations who are committed to restoring urban canopy in places like New Orleans and Detroit. So they're planting trees. You have one organization that I mentioned in the article called One Tree Planted. They basically dropped in, connected with a local community, a local organization called Soul NOLA. And Soul NOLA is doing work locally, and their full name is, I want to make sure I have it right, Sustaining Our Urban Landscape. They're committed to
ooh.
restoring that 200,000 tree loss in New Orleans.
Wow. Sustaining our urban landscape. Shayla, write that down, please. I would love to get them on the show as well, because, and I love the acronym because keep it Black. Soul. I love it. I appreciate it. But that's sort of the effort that it's going to take, right? It's going to require us, one, recognizing that this is a problem, and then doing the work of figuring out how we can resolve it. And I've seen, a number of the neighbors in our new community. It's a very diverse community, and one of the things that a number of my white neighbors are doing is they're not mowing their lawns. Like they allow the lawns to just sort of, instead of mowing it every week, they allow the lawns to go, 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks, because it's called free range lawn. There's like a word for it. I can't really remember, but basically they recognize that when you over mow your lawn and you over prune and curate and manicure your lawn, you cut down all the flowers that the bees need and all the other pollinating insects need. And so we're seeing a variety of movements that are really thinking more critically about how we preserve and interact with nature. But I'm always more interested in how we are responding to these issues. And so I'm wondering, in addition to the research and the reporting that you did in this article, talk with us about some of the nationwide efforts that you've seen in terms of, you mentioned Philadelphia and Detroit, but what are we changing the conversation in terms of what urban farming looks like? Are you sensing that there are more people becoming open to this topic? Is it still just, we granola Black folk who are having this discussion? Where do you see this conversation going nationally in terms of our community's embrace of these ideas for the health benefits, for the beauty benefits, for the nature benefits? It doesn't really matter to me. This is hook, whatever works, whatever gets you on the train is what works for me. Are you seeing any trends in terms of the conversation our community is having around these sorts of environmental issues?
Absolutely. I think this kind of ties back to the beginning of our conversation around stigma. Honestly, I think that there's very little stigma left when it comes to Black folks and nature, because you have Black folks who are exploring nature in so many different ways. As you mentioned, you have the urban farmers. You know, you have folks all around the country who are farming. Folks who have dates farms in California, people who have other types of farms in New York, all the way down south to Mississippi. We're doing it everywhere. But then you also
Mm.
have people who are simply tapped into herbs and gardening. You know, as little as it is advertised, there are so many Black people who do grow their own foods, not just outside of their homes, but indoors. I know many personally who grow in their living rooms, you know, grow on their patios. And also that's a conversation about not having access to fresh foods in your community. So you have
Right.
to grow in your living room if you want fresh lettuce. So it's an act of resistance at the same time. So yeah, those are a couple of different things that I'm seeing.
I think I'm in that number because I'm not a good gardener. Like I have some sprouts that I'm trying to pull up, and I'm just like, please God, let some good happen. But I did get over the pandemic this hydroponic system, which makes it really easy. I kind of like it's like gardening light. Like they make it super easy for you. It comes in with the light. The light has a timer. It's got the seeds sort of pre-planted for you, but it has really sort of reminded me that there is power that I have and in the ability to produce. I mean, it feels really good to put a salad on the table that came from our living room or came from the backyard, came from some, and again, hydroponics is a lot more water based. They make it really simple. It's hard to kill a hydroponic system. At least it has been in my experience, knock on wood. So, I wouldn't quite call myself an urban farmer, but certainly I'm concerned about what's happening to the planet. And I'm seeing that my kids are very concerned with what's happening to the planet. We're going to be going into a conversation on Gen Z voters in the next break or after the next break. But what are the young folks telling you about how they're feeling about what's happening with environmental justice concerns across the country?
That's a really good question. I wish we had our environmental justice reporter here alongside me, because she's done some great reporting on that very topic.
Oh,
My
don't worry. I love me some of y'all, so we gonna get them on
yeah,
the list.
yes, yes. But I mean, you know, I can't speak on this topic totally because again, I don't totally report on environmental justice. But my colleague Maya Richard Craven would definitely say that Gen Z is on board when it comes to
Mm. And
climate.
that's one of the things that makes me excited. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Your sound went out for just a second. Go ahead. You
Oh no,
said
I
her
was
name is
saying
Myra Richard Jennings
Maya Richard Craven.
Craven. Okay. All right. And you said that she would say that Gen Z is definitely on board and this is something that they very much care about.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
definitely has done extensive reporting on how Gen Z is responding to environmental injustice.
I love that. If I'm listening to this conversation and I'm in, Blacklandia, Block 123, in anybody's state, and I'm not seeing any of this effort in terms of federal programming or local programming to increase tree cover in my community, are there things that we as individuals can be doing that can help sort of steer the community conversation, the local community conversation to this reality that we need more trees and then have a system of implementing them? Are you seeing, can people just go rogue and just start throwing tree seeds out the car? I mean, how can we do this if we're not in an environment or in a jurisdiction or municipality where there's some sort of program that's designed to increase tree cover? But obviously we now all know that we need it. What can individuals do until their government begins to respond the way some of these folks in Detroit and Philadelphia are?
Definitely. Well, you know, as some wise people have told me, you start at home. You know,
Mm.
if in your home, do you have any plants? You know what I mean? How are you feeling? How is your mental health doing? You can always go and get some plants, fill up your home. And honestly, I'm even down for faux plants. They don't have to be real plants, because I think that fake plants also, you know, just seeing the greenery, it does something to your
Mm.
mind. And then check in with your neighbors. You know, how are they doing? How are their yards looking? What can you all do with what you have? But definitely policy is a big part of this. Your local politicians have to be on board. Well, they don't have to be on board. That's a whole nother story if we're talking about some activists out of Los Angeles, you know, who kind of went against the grain
Mm.
and started planting until the politicians got on board, because that's how much they needed plants within their community. So yeah, there should be
Wow.
a conversation definitely with your local politicians about this.
Yeah, and this one of the things that I think people need access to as well, as we're coming to the end of our conversation together, is the data, right? Is there a space that I can go that looks at comparisons between tree covers in communities in my neighborhoods? Like, can I say, well, I know this is a white zip code. Let me type this in and see how much tree cover they have. Is that data being maintained in any place where the average American can get access to it?
There is, and I wish I had the exact organization on hand, forgive me, but there's a partner who works with One Tree Planted who has a database, a tree equity database. So a tree equity
Ooh.
map, actually, where you can look across the country and see, what is your city score?
Ooh. Oh, the tree equity score from
Yes,
American Forest.
yes.
Okay, so tree equity score. Shayla, I'm going to drop this into the chat. Let's please tweet this out because I want to know what's the tree equity in your community looking like, folks. We're going to have a whole lot more environmental conversations over the course of the next few months. So I want people to be asking, what does the tree equity look like in my community? And if there is a complete inequitable distribution of tree cover, then that's information that we need to be taking down to the local city council and saying, what are you going to do about this? We have noticed that there is a whole lot of trees cover over here. The Black communities ain't got no trees. We got asthma, we got diabetes, high blood pressure, and hypertension. We ain't got no trees. What are we doing about it? Where is this going to be entered into the city budget? And if your city council doesn't have a plan for it, create a plan and say, okay, city council members, this is what we want to see done. We're going to come and meet with you. We're going to have conversations with you. We're going to be at your office. We're going to come not just once, twice, three times a lady. We're going to have a whole bunch of our friends. We're going to find out your public schedule. We're going to meet you every public place you're going to be. And we're going to ask you, how are the trees? We wouldn't know because you ain't planting none in our community. I'm just saying. It's one way. It's one approach. Alexa, we are really grateful for the work that you are doing and the work of Word in Black. How can people continue to follow you, to follow your reporting, and to connect with Word in Black and become a supporter of that work so that we can continue to benefit from the stories that center us and are by us?
Absolutely. Thank you again for having me. You can find me on Twitter at Alexa Imani or alexaimanispencer.com. And you can follow us on wordandblack.com or check us out on Twitter at Word in Black.
Really appreciate having you here. And it's nice to know that the Black granola community is expanding. We are here, we are live, and we breathe fresh air. So there's that. Alexa, thank you for being with us. Really a pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Folks, 866-80182.